Hello Art 1 classes. Today, in this presentation, I'm going to be talking to you about everything you need to know about our first big project on narrative art. Narrative art is art that tells a story using pictures, images. The thing that makes a story really powerful is that it can make you feel things. A really good story can inspire your imagination, it can evoke emotions, and it can also capture things that you feel that other people around you can relate to in a similar way. Images, drawings, have been around for much longer than language and written words have been. People have been using art to tell stories since the beginning of time. When you look at this image on an ancient Greek vase, you might be thinking to yourself, what could be happening here? You might think one thing, and the person next to you might think that it's the same thing happening, or they could have a completely different idea about what's going on. What do you think the story could be behind this image? Narrative art will show something happening. It makes the viewer, the people who are looking at it, wonder, what's going on here? Your next project is going to be a drawing where you're trying to tell a story. Your goal is to capture people's attention and make them look at your artwork and really wonder about it. One way to make your artwork way more interesting is to add depth to it by showing foreground, background, and middle ground. You may have heard of some of these words before, but if you can show that some things are close to you, some things are a little bit further away, and other things are way off in the distance, it'll make people have to stop and look a little bit longer to figure out what's going on in your image, and it will make them think about it just a little bit harder. Objects in the foreground are going to be the things that are closest to the viewer, the person that's looking at your picture. In the foreground, you're going to see a lot of detail because the objects are close enough to really be able to see them well. In this image, the figure on the horse is pretty close to us. You're able to see a lot of details and textures and shadows. The middle ground is going to be further away than the foreground. It's probably going to be behind the objects that are in front of you, closest to you. And the background is the part of the picture that's furthest away. The background won't have quite as much detail. When you see the castle in this painting, you can tell it's a castle, but it doesn't have nearly as much detail as the figure on the horse. The closer an object is, the more detail you're going to see in it. Objects that are closer to you in the foreground are also going to appear larger and closer to the bottom of your page. In this photograph, you can see a cheetah that is obviously the animal that's closer to us, and it's also down lower in the picture. Objects that are in the background are going to appear like they're farther up or higher up in your picture, like the wildebeests and then the mountains that are way off in the background. This narrative drawing will be your first major project. You're going to be making a drawing that tells a story about anything. What it must include is some sort of action. Something has to be going on. Something's happening in your drawing. It also must include something in the foreground, something in the middle ground, and something else in the background. I am not going to tell you what to draw for this project. You are the one that gets to come up with the idea of what you're going to draw. As long as your drawing seems to tell a story, it doesn't matter to me if you draw people or animals or things that you know of. As long as I look at it and I wonder to myself, what could the story be behind this image, then that means you've done the right thing. If you're having trouble coming up with an idea, here are some prompts that might help you out. Think to yourself, how could I tell a story without using words? If you're using words to tell a story, the details are in the types of words that you're using. But in an image that's a narrative drawing, the details are going to be in your drawing instead. You will want to show some kind of action in your drawing. So think about movement. Think about, instead of the person standing there, maybe it's while they're running because of whatever's happening in the story. How can you make it interesting enough to capture people's attention and to tell a story? This is our timeline for our narrative drawing. The first thing you're going to do is just generate ideas. Come up with 10 different ideas of things that could happen in your picture. That's going to be due on August 17th, which is Thursday, today. The next thing you'll do is you'll narrow it down out of those 10 to just 2 interesting ideas that you think could make an interesting drawing. Those are going to be due on the 28th, which is Friday, tomorrow. After that, you're going to work on 2 thumbnail sketches. I will go over these in a little bit more detail later on, but basically, thumbnail sketches are really rough sketches. They're going to be small. They're not going to have a whole lot of detail. The first one will be due on August 31st, which is Monday. The second one will be due on September 1st, which is Tuesday next week. Your nice rough draft is going to be due on September 4th. This will be where you really think about which one of these 2 rough drafts you want to really focus on and to make a rough draft that's nice. It's not going to be on the final paper, but it'll have a lot of detail in the drawing. On September 8th, that's when we'll start on the final paper.